Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Aranza Zugalan and I'm a member of the Build Up editorial team.
Welcome to Build Up, the European Commission's portal for energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings. Directly stemming from the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, Build Up is the meeting place for everyone involved in making the European building and construction sector more energy efficient. Every month we focus on a topic that is key to making Europe's buildings as energy efficient as possible. Exploring that, you can find the latest content such as expert talks, webinars, case studies and more. From architects and engineers to academics and policymakers, we've got you covered. Build Up brings together thousands of registered members to reap the benefit of Europe's collective intelligence on all aspects of energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings. The Build Up portal benefits from the expertise of our ambassadors. Drawn from industry and academia, the ambassadors bridge the gap between EU and national level and help shape our editorial content. Want to promote your work? Build Up disseminates your research, projects and events through a variety of channels. Become a member to exchange knowledge with your peers. You can disseminate tools and resources, share good practices, and consult open source publications. Join the discussion on social media and become part of the Build Up community, or subscribe to our newsletter to receive the latest news. However you participate, the Build Up portal is here to inspire, inform and connect. Build Up, the European portal for energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings. Join the community for opportunities and updates.
It is a pleasure for Build Up to host today's webinar entitled The Right Steps to Sustainable Cooling. The webinar will provide an overview of the research advances of the EU-funded project ResCool inside the framework of the Future of Cooling program at the University of Oxford. Today's agenda is split into three main parts, beginning with an introduction to the Future of Cooling program from the University of Oxford, presented by the Dr. Nicole Miranda, Program Manager and Researcher on the Future of Cooling program of the Oxford Martin School. This will be followed by a brief interactive Slido about cooling solutions and technologies. Secondly, introduction to the project ResCool and the last scientific contribution from Dr. Jesus Lizana, Marie-Curie Fellow in the Department of Engineering Science at Oxford Martin School and leader of the ResCool project, who will introduce us to the ResCool project and also the latest scientific contributions on climate risk. Following the introduction of the ResCool project, we will have a brief Q&A session with both speakers, so we encourage the audience to send us questions at any point during today's session. For the third and final part of the webinar, we will return to Dr. Jesus Lizana, who will discuss climate adaptation and the incumbency and barriers in the cooling sector, highlighting the right steps to sustainable cooling. To round off, there will be a second Q&A session. You will be able to find the webinar recording on the Build Up portal and our YouTube channel in the coming days, together with the presentation slides. And before leaving the floor to Dr. Nicole Miranda, I would like to remind you that Build Up has recently changed its website to offer a new digital image. In this regard, we are launching a survey to collect the opinion and comments from you, our users. You will be able to find the link in the chat. Thank you very much in advance for your help. And now, without further hesitation, we will move directly to our first speaker of today, Dr. Nicole Miranda. Dr. Miranda, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, thanks to Build Up for having me today for this webinar. As introduced before, I'm a senior researcher here at the Future of Cooling program in Oxford, and today I want to talk to you about our program, but also its latest contributions. So to set the scene, let me just try to move the arrows. There we go. So to set the scene, these are the numbers and the statistics that pop out when we talk about cooling. 1.1 billion people are at risk of lack of access to cooling. This means a risk of health or mortality even. The International Energy Agency in 2018 had a report saying that 10 new air conditioners would be sold every second till mid-century. So that is an enormous amount of energy that will go to power those air conditioners. And further, it estimated, the same agency, that the energy to power those is going to be equivalent to all the energy that the USA, Europe, and Japan use today. So it's quite impressive figures, I would say. Oh, there we go. So what does this mean? It's that by the end of the century, air conditioning is going to be using more energy than heating. We're only at the beginning of this S-curve shape, so we can only start to see what is coming further ahead, and that's unfortunately. So what we do here at Oxford, our main umbrella research question is how to understand and shape the future growth of global cooling demand. And this is aligned with the Sustainable Development Goal delivery. So we're a bit different than other research teams in two aspects. It's first that we're very interdisciplinary, and second is this concept of wanting to shape. Other research groups and teams search on the focus on the understanding, but we want to shape. So that means creating high impact, talking to policy makers, and trying to change these trends, this S-shape curve that I showed in the previous slide. This is a overall look at our team. As I said, it's quite interdisciplinary, so it's looking at health. We have scientists in primary healthcare. We have socio-technical people, social scientists, looking at behaviors, also at the social cultural determinants of thermal comfort. And on the technical side, with Jesus and other colleagues, we are looking at production network, so how to insert circularity into the production of air conditioners or other cooling devices. I'm looking at refrigerants and what is their true impact on global warming, because the metrics that we're using aren't actually reflecting their true contribution. And finally, on the technical side, we're also looking at assessments and at different solutions at personal, city, and building scale. And these are some of our partners. We have teamed up with many here in Oxford, but also externally with high influencers in the cooling arena. So the way we've made impact is first through publications. So far, we've done 45 high impact publications, some in Nature Energy, Nature Climate Change, and in the following slides, I'm going to dive into one that I believe is very interesting for this forum. We've also featured in much press, as you can see here, and thanks to our great comms team, may I add. And in terms of influencing policy, we've engaged with UNEP, COP26, with the UK Parliament, IPCC, and others. So to dive into the science itself that we looked at in our first, we call it our flagship paper, which was published in 2020. This perspective looked at how cooling is very important for all of the Sustainable Development Goals. However, it is not mentioned in a single target of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we saw that the tie is clear through literature review, through a systematic literature review, that there's many publications that bring cooling together with energy. So that is in SDG 7. However, we found links for all of the SDGs. For example, for zero hunger, we have cooling as a means of cold chains that would support that SDG. And for another example could be clean water and sanitation, where cooling can be coupled to sanitation of water through osmosis systems that do both cleaning water, but also cooling effects. So this is the framework that we published in that same article, and we propose to organize all the different concepts of cooling can be seen through this framework. The macro drivers are those that are outside of the cooling. Sorry, I'm getting distracted with the chat. So the macro drivers are anything that influence the demand for cooling, which is outside of the cooling arena itself. And then how do we implement change is through these levers. So we can have social, technical, business models, governance, and infrastructure levers for change throughout the life cycle assessment of cooling technologies or cooling behaviors or cooling ways. So for example, if we look at the column of business model, there's cooling as a service. Cooling as a service is a pay-as-you-go service, and it focuses on the production side and the cooling activities. And it's a business model that can change the sphere of cooling. Because its value proposition is to make cooling more sustainable in a way that the end user can avoid installation expenses, and the owner and of the assets actually retains the assets and operates them, and it's in their best interest to have the most efficient assets and cooling solutions. So that is just one example, but this framework can be used for behaviors. It can be used for circularity and other themes that we are also looking in our Future of Cooling program. So I wanted to talk to you about more impactful work that is running today. And the first is the UK Parliamentary Inquiry, which is looking at heat resilience and sustainable cooling. This is an inquiry that started because I went to pitch together with other scientists in other areas and won a scientific pitch for the Environmental Auditing Committee to run this inquiry. And what that means is that today, well, as a matter of fact, just last week, they opened this inquiry asking for evidence and to cover questions, for example, as how do we implement sustainable cooling in a UK setting, and how do we learn from other countries that are already experiencing more extreme heat. It's all about the implementation. So we can already see that there has been advances in the right directions here in the UK. And that you may think the UK is quite template and doesn't suffer very much heat. However, the buildings here, we have a large stock of buildings that are historical and need retrofitting, and that is a challenge when it comes to a hotter planet, and when we need to go back to our designs and see how do we install ventilation, how do we install radiative cooling or more water bodies around our building to keep them cool. And so finally, I just wanted to leave an invitation where you can learn more about how the UK and other countries around the world are going to be affected by the increase if we do not meet the 1.5 degrees Celsius global mean temperature limit that was agreed in Paris, and if we overshoot it to 2 degrees, what will happen to the world? And today at 4 p.m. we have this paper coming out, and I'll leave you the link. The link isn't live until 4 p.m. when the embargo lifts, but a warm welcome to all of you to read it. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miranda, Nicole. So as we announced, we are having a Slido session now. So let's go for it. Let's all test our knowledge in cooling. Perfect. So you can use your mobiles to join Slido with us, and perhaps we can go for the first question. Let's see. Okay, perfect. So for the first question, the team of ResCool is asking us which technology currently dominates the cooling sector and present barriers to achieving sustainability. So vapor compression, refrigerant technology, solar power cooling systems, geothermal cooling system, or evaporate cooling towers. Let's go. Since that we have vapor compression, refrigerant technology seems to be ahead of all of them. Okay. Okay, perhaps we can go with this one. So 80% of you thinks that vapor compression refrigerant technology is the one that currently dominates the cooling sector. Interesting. Let's go to the second one. So for question 2, what are some of the barriers in the cooling sector that hinder the transition to sustainable cooling? The limited availability of alternative cooling technologies, inadequate energy efficiency standards, inefficient investment in research and development, or all of the above? So seems that many of us think that all the above, that is a mix of a little bit everything, no? All the previous ones, right? Super. Yeah, thank you so much for being so active. Let's go to the third one. Question 3. What happens in a building if we promote high insulation and air tightness without addressing natural ventilation properly? The building will be more resilient to heat, the energy consumption for cooling will increase, the energy performance certificate will result in a low rating, or the building will be overheated in the hot season, in the absence of air conditioning. It seems that everybody, well, we have somebody saying that energy consumption will increase, that's for sure. Okay, interesting. Mainly almost 70% thinks the building will be overheated in the hot season in the absence of air conditioning, and around 20% thinks the building will be more resilient to heat and the energy consumption for cooling will increase, for sure. Let's go to the fourth one. Is there? Do we have a fourth one? Okay, it's done. So let's go to the first presentation of Dr. Jesus Lizana. Jesus, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Arantxa. Thank you for hosting this webinar. We are delighted to introduce the work that we are doing. And in this first presentation, I am going to introduce my Marie-Curie project, ResCool, Resilient Cooling Towards Climate Change Adaptation of Cities and Buildings, a Marie-Curie project that I started 2 years ago in the University of Oxford with a really exciting experience that I am going to share. I am an architect, so it's weird to me to be working in engineering. I have many questions about this, but I think sometimes after many years working with engineers, they like me. But I would like to start talking about from where I come from, because I am from Seville, a lovely place in southern Spain with fantastic food and lovely weather, but easily more frequently reaching temperatures higher than 40 degrees Celsius, even 45 degrees Celsius. But this is not only in the south of Spain. Even in Oxford, last summer, we were reaching for the first time ever temperatures higher than 40 degrees Celsius, breaking records of temperatures in the UK. This is really important because we need to understand that it's not only in the south where we are going to suffer the highest increase in temperatures or the highest impact of heat. We are going to be affected globally, and we need to start addressing cooling globally. And this is the main target of this project, the project ResCool. We try to provide answers to the following question: what can we do to mitigate the impact of heat globally? In order to provide answer to this question, in this project, we are working at different action scales in order to understand much better the implication of climate change globally, what are going to be the countries more affected by the rising temperatures, in order to provide solutions for the urban overheating, providing tools to facilitate the urban diagnosis to identify these hot spots where we need to start prioritizing actions regarding building overheating, defining novel indicators to measure the overheating situation of buildings. And finally, how to address people discomfort and sustainable cooling more efficiently. That will be the second part of the presentation. This research project is divided in 5 work packages related, which can be divided into main groups. 3 work packages specifically looking at climate risk assessment regarding to data collection, holistic evaluation workflow, identification of climate impacts. And on the other side, once we know where we need to start prioritizing actions, what are the adaptation interventions that we need to implement in order to identify the best available adaptation measures and the definition of resilience action plans. Additionally to these 5 work packages, I also have in the project 3 transversal work packages related to the project management, the training and knowledge transfer, and dissemination, exploitation, and communication of all the research activities. And here I'm going to explain briefly the 2 major contributions that we got from the projects. In this case, related to climate risk assessment. The first one is related to volunteer distributed computing. This is the climate model that we did to support this new article that will be released, that the embargo will be released this afternoon at 4 p.m., where we are modeling the climate change at different scenarios at 1.5 at 2 degrees Celsius of global mean temperature rise globally, in order to identify the countries more affected for the rising temperatures. This is quite important, as Nicole was introducing previously, because right now we know that there is no limit, there is no pathway to keep below 1.5 degrees Celsius or global mean temperature rise. So the next question is to ask how much we will increase, what countries will be more affected. In this case, with this distributed computing, what we use is up to 30,000 volunteers computers in order to maximize the computing capacity to be able to develop the highest spatiotemporal resolution model of climate change. Additionally, we are also working with citizens' weather data, and this is coming from data that we can, from sensors, in this case, weather stations or small sensors that we can install in our homes and whose data we can share publicly through different open access platforms. In this case, we are overcoming one of the limitations of the previous simulation is that in this global modeling, we are not considering the implication of the urban heat islands, the higher temperatures that we can find in cities in comparison with the surrounding rural areas. So here we use this large amount of data in order to identify the hot spots in cities where we need to start prioritizing actions and be able to support decision making. Additionally, regarding climate adaptation, the two major contributions are related to novel indicators to measure the overheating situation of buildings in order to understand if the indoor environment of the building is hot because it's hot outside or because maybe the building is not well designed. So here where we try to define is novel approaches where we can use monitoring data from the building in order to understand vulnerabilities and potential actions that we can quickly implement to mitigate overheating. The last major contribution was a paper recently published in Buildings and Cities, a paper where I would like to focus in the last presentation, explaining the barriers to sustainable cooling and what are the right steps that we need to implement and deploy globally to sustainable cooling. Now I will start discussing and introducing more in detail the work I was introducing previously regarding the citizens' data to generate accurate urban climate information globally to help to identify these hotspots in cities where we need to start prioritizing actions. In this case, when we talk about citizens' weather data, as I said, these are coming from sensors that I, for example, have in my home, and we can share publicly for science in this case. And here globally, when we understand globally, we have a network of 550,000 citizen weather stations globally, a network that is 12 times larger than the professionally operated weather station network. And specifically with a very high density in Europe. Just to clarify, while in the previous study we were talking about simulations, in this case, this is not a simulation, this is what is happening. So this is a really valuable source of information because we are monitoring in real time what is happening inside the city. And this is something that we can easily replicate globally to understand the urban climate and identify these urban heat islands in cities. This is an example of the city of London, and we can see how in a summer day in some urban areas of London, we can find a temperature of 6 degrees Celsius higher than in the surrounding rural area. But we were working here is also how to facilitate this workflow and developing software in order to facilitate the data collection from different platforms. How can we quickly get all this information, developing, apply existing pre-processing quality control steps in order to eliminate potential outliers that we can find in the data, and different diagnosis tools and visualization tools in order to limit these hotspot areas in cities to support the decision making. This is a tool that right now we are validating in the city of London using accurate data from urban, suburban, and rural areas in order to validate the accuracy of this information and try to understand much better how we can use this potential source of data to support climate risk mitigation. And this is the end of my first presentation.
Okay, Jesus, thank you so much. So interesting. It's a pity that we cannot see more about this paper that is coming at 4 o'clock, but we will for sure read it, all of us. I'm sure of that. So let's go to some questions that are coming from audience for both Miranda, Dr. Miranda, and for yourself. Let's begin with Nicole. The audience are asking, what are the top 5 ways by which nature cools the earth? Should they be our priority in this study?
Absolutely, we have to start from natural-based solutions and passive solutions that don't consume energy, and that's what we are recommending to do all of that work on designing buildings smartly, and only as a last resource use air conditioning, because so far it has been intense in its energy conservation, but it has protected vulnerable communities as well. So we do need to acknowledge that. We just need to make it more smartly used. In terms of the 5 top technologies that I would recommend, there's so many. We're working on a classification right now with Jesus, and passive technologies. I'll just give you an example of like areas of technologies. Radiative cooling, which uses the cold in space, is quite upcoming. And what it does, it uses special materials that can send the heat back into space through the exact wavelength that would bypass in some way the atmosphere. Then more natural ones is vegetation. Having gardens and large trees around our buildings is absolutely necessary. A third one could be water bodies in any form. It could be natural ones, natural rivers or lakes that we have around, but also ponds that are man-made. So there's quite a diverse range of shading and natural and passive solutions that, yeah, it is a world out there of options, let me say.
Okay, awesome. So interesting. For Jesus, our audience is asking, will it be wise to shift to cities which currently have 1.5 to 2 degrees lesser temperature than normal for next 10 to 20 years as a part of climate adaptation or mitigation step?
This is an interesting question, because one of the insights that we got from this article that we released today is that we will need to apply climate interventions globally. What we may find is that we may think at the beginning that other countries, for example, may not be affected by the rising temperatures, but we also need to think that in other countries, buildings are more vulnerable to the rising temperatures because they are designed to keep the heat inside in order to maximize the solar gains in winter and minimize the ventilation in order to reduce the energy demand for heating. So we may see a change in the way that cities in other countries are designed right now. Even though, for example, right now we may not see window shutters in the streets in other countries, maybe it's something that can grow easily in the future in order to be prepared for a hotter world.
Okay, perfect. You both have talked about citizens somehow. No, Jesus was talking about this weather data collection, uber interesting, right? Because I believe it's not only collecting data, but also making people understand that they are part of this, right? So it's very interesting. And Nicole was talking about shaping, no? And rather than just understanding, what is also super interesting because it's bridging the gap. We all want that, right? I will ask for both of you in your different approach. Where are the users in all this picture right now in this project of ResCool? How important they are for you both?
I can go first maybe. I think one of the important things is that we can maximize the capacity that we have in academia if we use the support of the citizens. And this is something that we are doing increasing our computing capacity using computers from citizens around the world. Up to 30,000 computers are registered in the simulation environment where we are working for the climate modeling using the a platform here based here in Oxford. And at the same time, with the citizen data, it's quite expensive to deploy monitoring infrastructure in cities globally in order to identify the hotspots. But using data that we already had available from citizens is quite easy. We only need to access to this data easily, and we are reducing the infrastructure costs and the time that we need to spend from academia to be able to perform this diagnosis.
Awesome. We continue to receive questions. It's very funny that they keep jumping. So it's really, really nice. There's a question for both. They said, did you find a limit in human/construction density deriving in clear limitations for passive cooling solutions? Perhaps Nicole go first this time.
So sorry, just to recap, is there limitations due to density, population density?
Yeah, in human/construction density deriving in clear limitations for passive cooling solutions.
Well, I think we can always be innovative because even in the most dense places, high-rise buildings can provide shade, and you can implement at the ground level vegetation, even if it's alongside roads, right? It's a very, very interesting question because in itself, population density in a city produces this urban heat island effect, and so we do need space, I guess, to do courtyards and bigger interventions, but it's a challenge we need to address. It's not something that, oh, we can't do it because it's too dense, we can't provide cooling and walk away from that. No, we have to find solutions that are there, and perhaps not looking only at cooling a larger space, but taking the question from before, the user, we need to focus on cooling people's bodies before we cool all of the air around them, for example, in buildings. That's very energy intensive, and there is personal cooling devices out there, really interesting materials like infrared invisible materials, so they would allow our own infrared to be dissipated outside of the body without being captured by our clothes. Like, there's amazing technology out there. We just need to start implementing, testing and getting it out there so that we don't all run to air conditioners as the default solution.
Exactly, absolutely. For Jesus, it says, in your climate risk assessment, did you take into account also the probable increases of waste heat deriving from air conditioning consumption?
In the work that we did recently, this is one of the limitations of our study. We are not considering the increase in the maximum temperatures in our study. There was one of the limitations. At the same time, we are not also considering in this last publication the impact of the urban heat islands. It's something that I said before, but it's something that we are addressing in a different way. This is an area where we would like to get resources to be able to contribute. This is an open discussion that we already have in the group, how we can evaluate where we are going to suffer the highest increase of heat waves, with this different to the mean increase in temperature values. But it's an open question where we are looking for funding.
For sure, money came out. I think we are gonna have one more because they keep coming. That's really nice. I will, for all my audience, I will keep them here for the last ones, but I want them to continue. Last one, and for Nicole, I think it says, in your opinion, what are the best sustainable cooling solutions for a massive concrete office building nowadays? Good question.
Okay, it's an excellent question, and I think that I'm going to say in a very diplomatic way, I think it really depends on the context. If there's high humidity, if there's the orientation of the building, if it's a retrofit or new build, right? So all of these things take into account. But it's going back to that that awareness of the diversity of solutions that are there, and taking the cooling of the user as a first step, the comfort, not necessarily temperature, because we haven't talked about there's other thermal variables that might make a person more comfortable, like speed of air. So fans can help with that. So even if the temperature isn't a massive drop. So it really depends on the context, on the environment, and on also there's cultural norms to follow and learn from history of building design. Yeah, but if you want to lower your bills at home, I think getting lots of plants, getting a bit of water is a good way to start.
Yeah. In fact, there is some water collection lately that I have read, very interesting. So please, audience, keep sending the questions. We will have another Q&A session. This was very, very interesting, I believe, also for the speakers to see where are you interested. But let's hear again to Dr. Jesus Lizana for the last part, and we will keep answering questions in a few minutes. Thank you. Jesus, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Well, in this presentation, I will explain one of the last papers that we published recently regarding the incumbency and barriers in the cooling sector and how to address the right steps to sustainable cooling. This is an interdisciplinary work that we did combining different disciplines in Oxford, in which I would like to start discussing firstly the meaning of cooling. If I am able to move the slide. Let me try again. Okay, here. What is cooling? And here what is important to understand that cooling does not only mean installing air conditioning. We have a large portfolio of passive and low carbon techniques and technologies to provide cooling efficiently and in a more sustainable way. Solutions that we can classify in 5 main areas: solutions for solar protection, for heat prevention, for heat modulation, heat dissipation, of heat removal. But at the same time, right now, the faster and the easiest response to rising temperatures is always to install an air conditioning. This is something that we can do only in one day. We can buy today and install tomorrow, and we can create easily comfortable indoor environments. And this market dominant technology is creating a long-standing incumbent in the cooling sector, generating different barriers that we here classify in 5 main areas. These barriers are related to building policies exclusively focusing on energy efficiency, a step of analyzing the passive survivability of buildings, or the passive performance of buildings when they don't have air conditioning, and air conditioning only by temperature control, instead of using all thermal comfort variables that we can have to provide cool, to keep us cool. We also find a building-centric cooling system design instead of an occupant-centric design, cooling buildings instead of the people, with a business model specifically based on the product and not in the service. And the last one, with all the attention on a standard operational phase of cooling, without considering the real performance of cooling systems in a real environment. So in order to overcome these barriers, we need to understand also the right steps to sustainable cooling. And we define these steps as 8 in order to increase the heat resilience of the built environment, to downsizing cooling system and cooling needs, and also to mitigate the resource consumption and environmental impact associated with cooling. However, to address efficiently these steps, we need to overcome these 5 barriers that I will explain in detail, providing some examples of potential strategies that we can follow in the building sector in order to address these issues. I will start with the first 4 strategies, which are mainly related to passive cooling actions that we well know. Solutions for solar protection, avoiding solar heat gains in opaque surfaces and in windows. Solutions for heat dissipation, mainly from natural ventilation, of other alternatives where we use environmental heat sink at a lower temperature, heat modulation, where we use the thermal mass of the building in order to keep our building cooler for longer, or heat prevention, where we target to reduce the internal heat gains of the building or to reduce the external heat sources through insulation and airtightness. These are solutions that are not new. We can find a large portfolio for solar protection from opaque surfaces where we can create reflected roofs or surfaces or ventilated roofs in order to dissipate solar gains, and at the same time with walls. But also in openings, we had a large portfolio of solutions for openings to protect from the sun. Solutions such as external window shutters, or even having trees in the streets that can protect us from the sun at the same time in the building and in the street. And the same for heat dissipation, in this case, specifically looking at natural ventilation. We may think that natural ventilation is just opening the window, but that is not what we are discussing here. We have many fantastic and fascinating alternatives to increase the heat dissipation capacity of our building. Solutions, for example, in the case of the wind catchers that we can find in historical and ancient architecture, for example, in Iran. We try to capture the prevailing winds in order to introduce them into the building. Or solutions, for example, such as inner courtyard, solution that we can find in the Mediterranean region, the typical Mediterranean courtyard, where we are able to create a fantastic microclimate in the building surrounding, and also to promote cross ventilation to be able to dissipate more heat and faster. However, in order to deploy the full potential of this passive cooling alternatives, we need to overcome the first barrier regarding to building policies exclusively based on energy efficiency. And here, for example, one of the main points that we'd like to highlight is that all the indicators that we use to support building design are related to thermal energy demand, final or primary energy consumption, and carbon emissions, with few indicators to understand the building performance in absence of air conditioning, where we don't have cooling. Indicators such as discomfort hours or overheating risk. This is one study that we did in which we tried to compare the synergies and trade-offs when we use these two different indicators. Indicators in the vertical axis to measure the reduction of discomfort hours of these passive solutions when we don't have air conditioning into the building, and savings in energy when we have access to air conditioning in our buildings. So in the upper area, we find all the solutions providing synergies, providing benefit in both situations, when we have or we don't have air conditioning. But in the lower area, we find those solutions that provide trade-offs. In this case, solution meaning that when we increase insulation or when we increase the air tightness of the building, we are limiting the dissipation capacity of the building. We are reducing the capacity of the building to dissipate heat. And if we don't address ventilation properly, the overheating risk of the building will increase drastically. This is something that we may find in other countries, how they are promoting highly insulated buildings without overlooking how to address ventilation properly. This is just an example of a well-designed building regarding the indoor temperature oscillation and the outdoor temperature oscillation. If we address a highly insulated building without addressing properly ventilation, the indoor temperature of the building will be overheated. But at the same time, we also need to consider that we need to identify the real weather conditions where we are going to allocate the building. If we have a building in the middle of the urban heat island, the hottest spots that we can find in cities with higher temperatures in comparison with the surrounding rural areas, we may find that the night temperatures in the city will be much higher than in the rural areas, up to 6-7 degrees Celsius higher, limiting the capacity of the building to dissipate heat and overheating the building even more. So we need to also design building for the future and not for the historical or past weather conditions. And this is another of the limitations right now. most of the typical meteorological weather files that we use to support building design are looking at the past weather conditions, and even they are not considering the implication of the urban overheating. So we need to rethink how we should design buildings in the middle of cities where the dissipation capacity to heat is very limited. This is a previous study in Seville when we compared this scenario, and we found that in buildings with air conditioning, the urban overheating may increase the energy demand for cooling by more than 20%. But even in scenarios where we don't have air conditioning, the overheating of the building will increase by more than 30%. In this case, using discomfort hours as an indicator. If we address these 4 steps properly, we have a large chance that we may not need air conditioning. But if we still need cooling, if we still need to address sustainable cooling properly, we have 2 potential actions that we can implement for that. They are related to the smart management of more comfort variables and focusing on an occupant-centric design, meaning cooling people and not the building. However, here we need to overcome the second barrier. First, to understand that thermal comfort is not only temperature. We have many other variables that we can use to create comfort, and we should move beyond the classical approach where we use only temperature to create comfortable environments using or setting the thermostat at 24 degrees Celsius, and creating hybrid approaches where we create comfort using different comfort variables. For example, in this setup here, we can increase the thermostat temperature up to 27 degrees Celsius and at the same time increase the airspeed of the building. So with this strategy, we are able to reduce the energy consumption for cooling by more than 20% and without sacrificing comfort. This, for example, was last year. We found many recommendations regarding how to increase the thermostat in many countries to reduce the energy demand for cooling due to the energy crisis. However, they were overlooking to suggest also to increase the airspeed, a very easy solution to reduce energy demand without sacrificing comfort. This is a fantastic tool from the University of California, Berkeley, the thermal comfort tool, where we can explore how we can create these comfortable indoor environments. And this is just one example. Here we find an indoor environment with a setup at 27 degrees Celsius up with almost 0 airspeed. So here we can find how we are completely outside the comfort zone in which we feel comfortable. However, if we create a complete hybrid environment where we combine temperature at 27 degrees Celsius and a higher airspeed, we can reduce the energy consumption without sacrificing comfort efficiently. Additionally, we need to overcome the third barrier, is focusing on people and not in the building. And this is quite important because we all have different thermal comfort requirements. Even this is something that I can find easily here in Oxford. I think we are people from 20 different countries working in the same office. It's quite easy to see the different threshold that we have for thermal comfort. And it's important to understand that we need to decrease the centralized cooling requirements and the centralized cooling system that we define for buildings. And we need to stop cooling empty buildings or stop cooling more than needed. That is quite frequent. And what we can do is to define lower requirements, lower centralized requirements, and be able to create personalized environmental control system that we are able to adapt individually according to specific needs and criteria. And here we can find even right now a growing market of technologies for personal cooling, technologies such as personal desk fans, cool chairs, or even wearable AC devices that can help to support this design. This is something that was even already included in as right and combining from a recent article from the University of California of Berkeley, and how if we move beyond the classical set point temperature of 24 and we increase this set point temperature, introducing more comfort variables, for example, introducing ceiling fans in order to increase this airspeed, and at the same time creating this personal environmental control system where we can create adapted environments, we can decrease the energy consumption of cooling by more than 20%, even up to 30% in some climates. This is just one example from in Singapore, from BCA Academy, where we can see these strategies, how they combine air conditioning with ceiling fans and with these personal cooling devices in order to create these comfortable indoor environments adaptable for different criteria, reducing the energy demand for cooling. But even then, if we still need cooling, if we still need to implement cooling in the building, we have two additional steps that we can introduce to minimize the energy demand for cooling and to maximize the use of renewable energy. However, for these steps, we also have two barriers that we need to overcome. These barriers are related to, right now, we have a product-oriented business model instead of using a product-service model, something that Nicole was previously introducing, something that is frequently called, we can find other terminology, cooling as a service. And this means that we can find novel opportunities moving from the current situation where we, as a client, has to invest in the equipment, pay the maintenance of the equipment, and also the energy bill for that. And we can change this and be a client where we only need to pay a fee, like a monthly service, and then the company will be in charge of the installation of the maintenance and the energy supply for that energy. So with this, we can ensure that we will optimize the installation and we will maintain the higher efficiency possible in the cooling system. And we may also reduce the life cycle cost of the building because one company will be in charge of the end of the life cycle of the equipment in order to avoid the leak of the refrigerants that can increase the global warming up to 40,000 times more than CO2. And the last barrier is regarding the lack of innovation beyond the standard operational phase of the incumbent technology, the vapor compression refrigeration system. And here we need to understand two things. One, most of the indicators that we use to measure the efficiency in cooling, for example, the energy efficiency ratio or the seasonal energy efficiency ratio, they are not considering the humidity influence in the system performance or the efficiency to remove moisture in the air. It's quite interesting to see that in high humidity climate, the efficiency may not perform well, because even if sometimes we need to cool down the air to condensate water and then to introduce a post-heating step in order to prepare the air to an adequate condition for air supply. And additionally, the last step is we need to consider the whole life cycle of the equipment, in this case to promote ultra-low global warming potential refrigerants and eliminate the use of the F gases. These refrigerants in the vapor compression technology can leak from the equipment during its life or even at the end of the life cycle of the product and increase the global warming by more than 40,000 times more than CO2. And finally, we need to ensure that we use as much renewable energy as possible. And to do this, we don't have only to provide more renewable energy in the grid. We also need to demand renewable energy. And here there is an important role that we can take using thermal energy storage, which can increase the energy flexibility capacity of the cooling industry. This is one example of one previous study that we did when we compare the consumption of an air conditioning when we use a conventional operating mode, consuming energy as needed, and with a different approach where we integrate a cool battery into the system to provide energy flexibility for cooling. A cool battery, something like in the diagram that we see in the right side of the slides. So with this, what we are doing is we are consuming energy at the optimal times in order to store this cool, and then we can discharge this cool battery in order to supply cooling as needed. So with this, in heating we can find many benefits, but in cooling we find even more, because with cooling we need to understand that there are 2 points that I want to highlight here. One is that when we run an air conditioner at night, we are running that air conditioning instead of a temperature close to 35 or 40 degrees Celsius, we will run that air conditioner at outdoor temperature of 20 degrees Celsius. This means that we are increasing the efficiency of the system, because if we can see in this figure, in which we relate the nominal consumption of the equipment in relationship with the external temperature, we see how we decrease the outdoor temperature operation of the equipment, we can increase the efficiency by more than 20%. So the first is that the efficiency will be higher. And the second one is that during this time frame, the supply of renewable energy can be easily higher because there is lower demand in the grid. So the renewable energy will be higher, and also the energy prices will be lower. So following this strategy, we're able to reduce the energy cost by more than 50%. So finally, as a final conclusion of this presentation, I would like to highlight how we need to try to overcome the key barriers in the cooling sector in order to promote sustainable cooling, and specifically defining policies beyond energy efficiency, specifically considering the wider range of thermal comfort variables that we have available to provide cooling. We need to focus on the people and not in the building, and try to create an occupant-centric design in buildings. We need also to enable service-based business models instead of focusing on a product-based model in order to increase the efficiency and sustainability of the building products. And finally, we need to understand the real performance of the cooling and understand much better the humidity influence, the role of thermal energy storage to support renewables, and also the impact of gases. All these actions are really interesting. One of the potential limitations that we can find that we have right now, for example, and this is a final example, and I will finish my presentation here, is with the energy performance certificates of buildings. If we create, for example, an indoor setup in a building, considering more comfort variables, integrating ceiling fans, we can decrease the set point temperature in which we feel comfortable. But however, this is not providing a better rating in the energy performance certificates of the buildings. So we are overcoming the full potential of sustainable cooling due to an efficient energy efficiency standards that we have right now. So we need to be able how to enable and how to push this kind of strategies in order to be considered in existing regulation. This is the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you so much, Jesus. In fact, we did. It was a pity because many open questions now. Renewables, you put heat pumps out there. I mean, we need to do 2 or 3 more webinars about this. It was really interesting. I know you both, Nicole and you, have to run to a press conference, but we have few questions for you from audience. There is one, I think, directly for Jesus, that it was in the pipeline from before, that says how this distributed citizen sensing network was established, and it was through a collaboration with an existing company or network?
No, this is an existing network already. We can find different platforms from Netatmo or Underground. We are not organizing anything. This is an existing network globally where we can buy a small weather station that we can install in our houses, and we can share the data publicly. So this is like an open access network already available. We are just demonstrating how we can use it globally, and maybe how we can support to this scalability in those regions where we don't have enough data right now.
Outstanding. I mean, I think it's outstanding, really, that part. There is a very theoretical question from our audience that is quite interesting. It is why so much infrastructure is being created in cities which are already almost not habitable. I believe it's in terms of these urban heat islands, etc. Why we continue to put more infrastructure?
Here, I think that the main answer to that is we need to enable to provide accurate urban climate information. That this is the target of this project, of ResCool project. If we don't have the information, we don't know where we should start prioritizing actions. Of course, as soon as we identify the hotspots, it's quite easy to to support the decision making and try to enable and facilitate the implementation of interventions.
And a question for Nicole that is, I think, a big close-up. Shall we get rid of air conditioners?
I think that air conditioners have proved to be efficient, and they have protected vulnerable communities. And so we will, the future includes that solution. However, we need to take it as a last resource, not as the go-to solution.
Absolutely. In a personal note, I'm from Córdoba, so I understand Jesus so much. And in my house here, I don't have air conditioning, although we reach 47 degrees quite normally, so we can do it. Thank you so much. I will close here. A big thank you to the speakers and also to the audience for attending today's webinar. A reminder that you will be able to find the recording of today's session on the Build Up portal and our YouTube channel in the coming days, together with the presentation slides. Before finishing, just a little reminder about the Build Up survey. Giving us your feedback will be very helpful for improving our platform and tailoring our content to your needs. It's just 5 minutes, and you can find the link in the chat or in the portal. Thank you again, Jesus and Nicole. Was an outstanding presentation of your projects. A lot of luck for this presentation to the press this afternoon, and we wish you all a very pleasant end to the week. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you so much for hosting us. Bye-bye.
Bye.